Welcome to Breathe California TV. My name is Terry Trumbull. I'm the Environmental Health Chair of Breathe California. As a volunteer, each week we put on a show about protecting your lungs. Most of the money in Breathe California goes for grants to help people with breathing difficulty, asthma, COPD, allergies, and other things that for the most part didn't exist 200 years ago before the Industrial Revolution. But in spite of most people thinking smoking is our biggest problem, it's actually air pollution, the way we use our energy. So today we're going to be talking with a couple of hotshots from San Jose State about energy problems, how the garbage that we throw away in the ground turns into a major climate change problem and what we can do about it, and how climate change is melting the Arctic and we are having a gold rush, or should I say an oil rush, to stake a claim for the oil up there in the Arctic Ocean. See you in 30 seconds.
It's given me a chance to go out and be with people who has the same problem, and it helps you to manage your life better too, because you hear different things from each person, and it's just been really helpful in many ways.
Welcome back. This is Breathe California TV. Last year, Breathe California in this county alone helped 150,000 people with breathing difficulties. The public service announcements that you see throughout this program, we're going to give you a feel for some of those. But my focus is on preventing damage to your lungs, and that is about smoking and air pollution. Air pollution is all about energy, and we're blessed with Megan English and Jessica Cervantes to talk to us about our energy issues. These are fairly hot issues that you really ought to know about, and if we resolve them well, it's going to make the world a little better place for you. So let's start with Jessica. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
So how in the world is the garbage we throw away a problem for us?
Okay, well, when we throw away all our trash, like we see here.
It was nice of you to bring in some of your own to remind us what trash looks like.
Yes. So whenever we throw trash into landfills, it starts decomposing, and once it decomposes, it releases two primary gases, which are, it's approximately 50% methane and 50% carbon dioxide. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's actually 21 times more potent than CO2, and it creates a problem for air quality.
But methane is natural gas that we have in our homes. Any way we can use it?
Yes, methane can be used to power homes. It could power vehicles, businesses. It can be converted into energy. So Landfill Gas Capture does exactly that. It captures landfill gas, primarily methane and CO2, and it converts it into energy.
So I watched the movie The Internship, which is set at Google right next to the Mountain View landfill. Are they using this technology?
They are using that technology because the shoreline landfill is right across their street. So they're just doing landfill gas capture and transporting that gas into Google and utilizing it.
So a lot of our audience doesn't know when they go to a concert at Shoreline or they go out there in the park that they're looking at a square mile of garbage.
And they actually, it used to be a landfill, and they decided to convert it into the park as it looks now, and they do concerts and all that now. But actually in around 87, there was a woman, she decided to have a smoke, and
which was legal then.
Yeah. And she caught fire because of all the gases that were escaping from the ground.
So by recovering the landfill gas, you can also reduce problems with the potential for fires or even explosions with natural gas.
Yes, correct.
So you mentioned it's 50% carbon dioxide. That won't burn. What do we have to do to take the gas off of a landfill to make it useful?
So they have to capture it. What they do, either they can do, they can put like pipes directly into the ground, and after that they can transport it into a converter that can change it into energy.
So is this a money maker for owners of landfills?
It is. I mean, rather than having, they used to do flares where it is mandated by the state to burn this gas or just let it go into the atmosphere, but they kind of stopped that. But I mean, yes, I mean it's a gas that's just escaping, and it can be converted into energy, and that's what we're looking for here in California. We're doing renewable energy, and I mean not just that, but it could also reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
So flares are clearly a solution to the methane gas problem, where it's so horrible. At least it gets converted into CO2 and water. So you keep talking about climate change. What's California's climate change law, and how does landfill gas relate to all that?
Okay, so right now we have AB 32. So that mandates California to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels, and further reducing greenhouse gas emissions 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. And I mean, Landfill Gas Capture can help California do that, accomplish that goal. And as I have here on my board, methane makes up 1% of California's emissions. And it might not seem like a lot, but once you take into account nationwide, it actually makes up 17% of methane emissions. That's only landfills. And I mean, that's a lot. We could capture all that and convert it, and also reducing, our greenhouse gas emissions. And also we have AB 341, and that's mandating us to reduce our waste going into landfills 75%, either by recycling or composting. And I mean, we could also do, like up in northern San Jose, we have that green waste facility that takes trash and converts it into energy. So that's another great thing. And also we have, the ARB, methane.
So who is ARB?
ARB is the Air Resource Board.
So that's the state agency that controls air pollution?
Yes. Yeah. And so we have the ARB landfill measure, which is asking us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to help our air quality. So that's something we can do. That's how landfill gas capture goes into or falls into those policies.
So you've highlighted one of the things. I attended some Clean Air Awards that Breathe California put on, and the regional administrator of EPA said, quit trying to sell climate change. People care about their health, 85–90%. People think we need to develop alternative energy, conserve 80–85%. Focus on that, even though it has the same effect as climate change. What's your view about all of that?
Well, that's true. I mean, climate change, once somebody says climate change, it's a term that we can't really relate to it directly. So when we say, okay, these gases are escaping into the atmosphere and they're actually hurting the public. When people, I mean, these greenhouse gases can affect people either by, like this is what Breathe California stands for, right? I mean, we're trying to increase air quality and to help people with asthma, and even eyes can get irritated with air quality. So that's how people can relate to climate change,
No, you're absolutely right. 40% of us in the South Bay, which doesn't meet health standards, have some sort of lung-related illness. And it's all the things you were just talking about. Asthma or allergies, which are reactions in our bodies that did just fine in 1800. It's all the crud that we're dumping out. And I can't imagine that methane and other contaminants coming out of landfill aren't a problem. So are there a lot of spots where we could use this technology?
Yes, well in California we have 370 landfills. And each year they accumulate 30 million tons of trash. And right now, so far, we have about like 1.2 billion tons. So all this is a potential for landfill gas capture. And I mean, yeah, we could just capture all our gas and utilize it while increasing our air quality.
Well, the law you're talking about says we've got to have 75% less trash than we did back in 1989. Is that consistent with using landfill gas? I mean, on the one hand, we're saying reduce the amount of garbage, but you're saying garbage is a resource.
Well, if we already have the garbage there, might as well utilize it, correct? I mean, and in the future, we just want to reduce our waste, and there's other ways to use our waste. There is, composting, better for our soils as well. Nutrients, it recycles nutrients back into the soil. So even though we want to reduce our waste, it's also important for us to use that waste that's already in landfills and convert into energy. And
So what are we doing with the CO2 if you're capturing methane gas? It's 50% CO2. What do we do with that?
So I'm not really.
I don't know the answer myself, but my guess is we view it as innocuous. It's
Yes.
harmless, so we probably just dump it into the air. But
Well, yeah, compared to methane, it's not as bad as methane. So, I mean, we see all these cars out in the road. I mean, we see it, it's still a problem, but it's not as much of a problem as methane.
so one of my clients before the two of you were born was called Getty Synthetic Fuel, and they did landfill gas recovery. And they cleaned up the CO2 and the water and a little bit of other things and sold natural gas to people. And they were bought out by a company that wanted the CO2, that there is enough demand for Lord knows what, dry ice or other things that we're using. But I can't imagine we need it for every landfill that's left. So we've got about 30 seconds left in this segment. What do you want people to remember?
Well, it's important for us to do land gas capture because it helps increase our air quality. And there is a small town in Denton, Texas. They did exactly that because their air quality was so bad. And now they can power their vehicles, and they also power like nearby businesses. So why not do it?
So this is a great idea Jessica has. Save energy and improve your health.
Yes.
So for the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about a oil rush. I want to call it a gold rush. If you saw the movie North to Alaska in 1959, which tells you how old I was, zillions of people went up there to make their fortunes. Well, we have the same thing happening now, only it's a bunch of very large countries battling about who owns the Arctic Ocean. Megan English will be talking about that in about 30 seconds.
The nice thing about Better Breathers Club is we go in and there's other people sitting around with oxygen. It's almost a relief that everybody looks the same in the room. It's a funny thing to say, but it's a good feeling. Breathe California means having resources available to us that will help guide us and make our lives easier.
This is Breathe California TV. I'm Terry Trumbull, a volunteer that hosts this show every week. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and never before could we have discussed the problem we are now, because climate change is real. Now, some of you may not feel you need to worry about climate change, but it is the same issue as our energy use for your health. It's the same issue as running out of fuels. In light of that, there's a real rush for fuel, and Megan English is going to talk about it. So what are we talking about here?
So essentially what happened with the climate change and the Earth heating up is the Arctic ice caps began melting. And with that, countries were able to enter onto the land before it was just ice, and now they can dock. And essentially what they found was it's reported about 22 to 30% of the world's natural gas and oil, as well as actual gold, so the gold rush is a correct term, diamonds, copper, silver, all in the Arctic caps. And essentially what is going on is all these countries are racing and they're trying to grab as much land as possible. The countries that are up there are Denmark, which is not listed on my poster, as well as Canada, Russia, the United States, and Norway. And they're all vying for this land, and what's been going on is countries, specifically Russia, have been trying to take as much land as possible. And in about 2000,
Now, when we talk about land, it's a perverse term because all of this is underwater, right?
Yes, correct. That is correct. So when I say land, I mean 200 miles off of any coast where these countries are. And in 2007, Russia was preemptive, and they started claiming more of that territory than any other country, and it's being reviewed at the UN currently. When I was researching this topic, I was not very well versed on it. I looked it up, not a lot of information to me, and it was really interesting to see how Russia and the US are still kind of in those two top spots vying for it. My poster kind of showcases that, with Russia and the US being those top contenders, while losing countries would be China and the United Kingdom, where they have no stake of land out there. Canada has been feuding with the United States over it as well, so they're on the up and coming, which is noted by my arrows. But essentially, it's this big competition to who can get all this oil and who can get all this natural gas that's been untouched for so long.
Canada's actually grabbed some Chinese ships that are exploring that area, causing tough relations. So back to your point. So the UN rules in favor of Russia or the US. Do they have any enforcement authority to make that work?
Enforcement is a little bit where these gray areas are seeming to come, because this is obviously something new. This only exists because of climate change. And if they were to go with Russia, then it would be difficult for U.S. policy. And when I was looking up what is the U.S. doing about this, what is U.S. policy, what are we being preemptive about? And essentially, a lot of politicians don't want to get involved because it has the implications of getting involved with Russia. And no one really involved wants Russia to get any more oil. They don't want Russia to have that stronghold on that oil and that natural gas, because they are trying to modernize. And there are some negative implications if Russia were to have more of a stronghold on this gas.
So there's some implications for this. It isn't just energy, it's a national security war type of issues. If I can pick on China, there are 3 sets of islands that have always been claimed by Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan, or Vietnam, which is 4 sets of islands. And in one case, they went and built a Navy base on one of these, and the other country isn't strong enough to fend them off. Do you see a chance for literal battles over these kind of resources?
I do get that feeling from the information. I also kind of see a change for people in Denmark and Norway, where this is their home, and with the rising temperature, their entire country has to change. Everything has been set up for these cold temperatures, and with the heat rising, with more people being in the area, it makes it almost unlivable, and gas lines break and houses collapse. And there's definitely a lot of detrimental activities that could happen, on top of the fact that, you know, the oil rigs could have catastrophic accidents, as we've seen before. So there's a lot of negative connotations, especially if Russia were to want to get the most, and every country wants the most oil possible, obviously. And Russia is really coming in very strong. They came in first in about 2007 trying to do this, and it's...
First meeting, they're the most advanced at
Correct.
Exploring.
Yes, they have already, they actually, in 2007, they tried to dive all the way to the floor to put a flag, a Russian flag, to mark that it is their territory. So they've been there, and they've been researching, and they've already been trying to tap into all that unused energy and all those ideas that what could be used, especially with the Earth not cooling down anytime soon. That just implies that there's more and more gas that's going to be available.
So the fish on the floor of the Arctic Ocean will know that they're Russian
Yes.
fish?
Exactly. They'll know that they're now Russian fish and not U.S. fish.
So you mentioned Denmark a couple of times.
Yes.
I'm watching my map of Europe in my mind, and Denmark's there. What do they have to do with the Arctic?
Well, it's the Arctic is a little circle, and there's 5 or 6 countries around this little circle, and they're involved simply by geographic involvement.
Namely Greenland.
Yes.
Which is a colony, if that's the right
Yeah.
term. It has less people in it than are listening to this show, but so as a consequence, they're on the Arctic.
Yeah, they are, and that's what I was referring to with homes being destroyed and lines, oil lines and gas lines being destroyed, as well as the infrastructures and bridges and all of this has been made to withhold a smaller population as well as a colder climate, and they've been really negatively affected. Of course, they don't have as powerful a voice as Russia or the US while they're in the UN, and unfortunately a lot of politics is representation, and they have lower representation, so they seem to be kind of the losers in the situation if there were any, and with Russia and the United States as the projected winners.
So let's just talk a little bit about this. When you say Russia has gone out 200 miles, that's the exact same distance that the U.S. has gone in the Gulf of Mexico, where no one seems to yell about it, to build BP Horizon. Of course, once we had that problem, so you're building oil derricks to capture way out far in the ocean. Are there some problems associated with the Arctic Ocean?
Yeah, it's, like I said, mostly unexplored. There's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of knowledge on how to work in a different climate that is so different from the Gulf of Mexico. There are catastrophic things that we have seen happen with riggers, and that's always something to think about. And that's something that's really negative. And I like to think of the Arctic race as a silver lining to climate change, and countries are finding climate change is melting the ice caps. What can we get out of this? And we can get oil and gas, but it's still a really negative outcome that's been negatively affecting our planet.
So what about the risk of ice? I mean, I was watching James Cameron did a documentary on finding the Titanic, and obviously it went down from an iceberg that was 2,000 miles south of this. Are we so sure about the safety of ice in the Arctic Ocean that we want to start putting oil development into it?
Yeah, it's definitely very unsafe, and with big storms, the ice can be carried, and that can destroy everything in its path. Ice is not as forgiving, and it's definitely, there's already been one rigger that's been destroyed because of ice and because of the cold waters, and it's very dangerous to see, and it's kind of like the into the wild, unexplored land, and what's going to happen, what are the negative implications of that, and they are really, really dangerous.
Yeah, I saw the Natural Resources Defense Council a couple of years ago did a program on this, and they had a guy from the Coast Guard who said the entire Coast Guard has one icebreaker for the whole world, any place where we have ice problems. And he said, you develop oil off of the coast of Alaska, there's nobody to help you if you're iced in, or the ice moves and chops off, and it really is going to be like an iceberg whacking the Titanic.
Definitely. And when they get hit, and also the maintenance of the riggers, because it's going to be a completely different climate. How do you maintain these machines? How do you maintain the well-being of the people living on it in such a different area and with such different weather and with ice absolutely everywhere?
So is the Arctic Ocean actually belonging to one country, or is it open to everybody? You know, when I go halfway between here and Hawaii, I think anybody in any country in the world is allowed to do things. It's international waters. Is this going to be a gigantic pond where the countries have just divided it up?
That's definitely what the UN's trying to figure out right now. They're discussing, you know, the 200 miles out. It's very difficult to draw lines of territory on the ocean floor, and that's the problem they seem to be running into. It'll probably be no man's land, but what they're trying to figure out is who wants what land and what is the best land, where have they found the most oil, and they'll deal with it case-by-case basis of general areas, because it is such a vast area, it'd be next to impossible to try to fix and set lines when the ocean is so transitory.
So this program basically said that's China's argument. It's international waters. You turkeys that happen to be on the 6 countries that border have no more right to it than we do out in international waters. And I'm not sure any of them is prepared to fight China over it. It's where we draw the line.
Yeah, and China's been a little bit sneaky. They've been going up and saying, oh, we're just exploring, we have no intentions. But Canada specifically, as they're fighting very, very hard for any land that they have against the United States, it definitely implies that China's ready to enter this. And what does that mean for the United States? What does that mean for Russia? What does that mean for Denmark, who is a projected loser and they don't have as much clout as the United States? And that is something really dangerous to have China enter the picture of the Arctic rush.
So what kind of policy should the U.S. have? What should our country be doing about all this?
So I think, and from the literature that I read, definitely there is there's an emergency feeling, and there's policymakers are saying this is moving too fast for us to come up with anything. What should Obama be doing? And basically what's coming out is prevention, preventative environmental ideas, and to have districting lines, and to be very strict with border control. And that's really what Washington and Washington insiders have been wanting, is strict borders.
Because somebody would try to smuggle in oil here? I'm joking. So we got 30 seconds left. What do you think we ought to be doing?
I think that this needs to come into a more public domain. I think this is something that's based off of more Washington insiders, and I think that the public should know what's going on and how this is going to affect U.S. policy, how this will affect our relations with China and Russia, and be preemptive to see how much oil we can get, but to also keep amicable relations with other countries.
So we've been speaking on our energy problems, some good solutions, some other problems that may be coming up. Next week we'll have 2 more shows with San Jose State energy experts. See you then.